occasionally get comments along the lines of, if you're a feminist, why are you not talking about the behavior of so-and-so? Where so-and-so is usually another person that calls themselves a feminist on the internet. Maybe a content creator that says something a bit controversial or something that angers people, but usually someone I've never spoken to.
I thought this was just a perk of the occasional weird man online, you know, the kind of guy who decides to hate watch my videos and leave a comment. A wonderful and very productive use of your one and precious life, by the way, thanks for the AdSense money. So I used to quickly dismiss it, because to me it was obviously absurd to expect me to be responsible for the behavior of a total stranger online. So I just convinced myself that the only possible reason why someone would suggest such an idea was a general low-level bigotry, or like maybe a lack of media literacy or something like that, but in general like stuff that is not very worthy of my time. But then I started to notice a remarkably similar mentality across the political spectrum, actually. The first example that came to mind while writing the script was how the chronically online side of the left sometimes insists that if I make leftist video essays and another creator who also makes leftist video essays does something problematic, then LeftTube has a problem with insert here the problematic thing, you know? And therefore I, and really all leftist YouTubers, are somehow responsible for it, despite the fact that, realistically speaking, the people in question have probably never spoken to each other. But I think this mentality exists outside of extremely niche and, in the grand scheme of things, completely pointless content creator problems. I think this mentality is getting in the way of quote-unquote regular people who do not work as public figures, God bless them, people who do not make a living with their platforms, people who just have regular jobs and perhaps want to get involved in activism. I noticed this in a lot of my leftist friends. They find themselves paralyzed when they try to get into activism because they want to get involved, they really are passionate about it, but every single association in our area has done something problematic in the past. Like maybe they didn't have the correct take on something, maybe a member of that organization, usually that no longer works there, has been accused of something terrible, maybe they wrote a manifesto and it was painfully cringe. I understand the feeling behind this very much, but I don't think this is a very productive or healthy mentality, because if in order to engage in politics in any way, you convince yourself that you first have to find a movement where every single member of that movement has been impeccable, has done no mistakes whatsoever, not one, in the entire history of that movement, like, honey, you're gonna be waiting for a long time because that movement has never existed in the history of humanity. You obviously get to set your own standards wherever you want them to be, but I find myself very frustrated at this mentality that I see on the left of finding nothing but flaws and critiquing out of existence every single attempt to make things better. Like, the bar should be high, but still reachable somehow. As a rule of thumb, if you genuinely endorse the core ideas of a movement, if the things that that movement concretely does are, in your opinion, useful and good, if the policies and practices supported by that movement are in line with your own morals and backed by data, and if you generally kind of like the people at the movement, or at the very least if y'all don't fight all the time, that's more than enough to join that movement. That's a very high bar already. Please stop considering yourself responsible for every single thing that anyone associated with that movement has ever done or will ever do. This is not productive in the slightest. I've spent a lot of years on the left, and a part of me is growing a little bit frustrated because if you're not doing anything about a big problem, I kind of don't care at this point if your motivation comes from moral purity, you're still not doing anything. And if you find yourself reluctant to this idea of not having responsibility, I completely empathize with it. And it probably comes from a good instinct, because the "it's not my business" mentality is definitely the default in the general population. And it's a big obstacle for progress, which is, by the way, why most movements usually start by raising awareness or something along those lines. But I have a feeling that this video is speaking to a pretty specific demographic of usually Western, liberal-ish, progressive-ish, left-adjacent people on the younger side. And in this specific portion of the population, I think we kind of have the opposite problem. Like, we're aware of many world problems, which is not a bad thing in itself, but since we have very little control over most of these problems, and that is, by the way, not because we're evil or anything like that, but because we can barely afford to be alive, then we end up with this sort of low-level guilt, resentment, vague misdirected anger, which in my experience usually just manifests in doom scrolling and yelling at each other online, and it doesn't really get us closer to any political goal. I wonder if we can frame it as a problem of differentiation. For people who don't know, in psychology, good differentiation basically means that we have a healthy sense of where I end and others begin. What's a healthy amount of responsibility to take for other people's problems, other people's emotions, distress, well-being, etc., etc. I believe that my responsibility comes from my agency. In short, if there's a problem and I can do something about it, meaning I'm physically, logistically, emotionally, and intellectually able to do something about it, then I should do something about it. Online, I think this principle translates in the fact that I cannot be directly responsible for what strangers on the internet do or say, because, and I cannot stress it enough, I have no agency over what these individuals decide to do or say. I've never met them, I've never discussed ideas or policies with them, I do not help them workshop their tweets or edit their scripts. I have no control over what they choose to do. And by the way, I probably should have no control over what they say and do, because who the fuck am I to decide whether another free adult who is sovereign over their own bodies and actions does with their time? Most of the people that are in my same content bubble live on another continent, don't speak my first language, have spoken to me 0 to 2 times in their lives, probably don't even know I exist. Being mutual with someone doesn't mean I know them personally. I think most of you know this, but it's worth repeating. I'm not intimate friends with most of these folks. And by the way, I also probably should not be that responsible for what my intimate friends do, because my intimate friends are also sovereign humans that have complete control over what they decide to say and do, and they don't treat me like a sort of Panama Channel for every single micro decision. I can try to talk to them in private, I've done so before, but I don't think I should get the blame for what they decide to do, because what the hell do I know about it? And by the way, the reverse is also true. If I ever say something dumb, don't go and tell about it to people that have associated with me in public. It's not their fault. They're not my babysitter. More importantly for you, offline, this means that if I go to a protest, and in this scenario it's a protest that I'm just attending, like I didn't help organize, I don't know the organizers, nothing like that. If I'm just attending this protest, and someone at that protest that I've never met does something violent or inappropriate, that is not my fault, because I had no way of preventing it. I will privately agree with you in saying that it's embarrassing and wrong and probably counterproductive, but I have no responsibility over it, because I've literally never met this person. And if I call myself a feminist, I am not responsible for what every total stranger on TikTok says under the hashtag feminism. And therefore, it would be absurd to expect me to condemn it. I don't need to distance myself from any of these situations because I'm already distant from them. So distant, in fact, that I have no control over them. And you know, in the future I may choose to speak against ideas that are strongly associated with an ideology that I have shown support for. For example, I've been working on an essay with the working title Against Misandry for a while now. That is not because I feel a pressure to speak against toxic feminism, whatever that is. It's just because I think it will make for an informative and clickable topic, and because I think I have good jokes and I think I have good takes about it. And that's really a judgment that only I can make for myself. Unfortunately, if you think that I should talk about a specific topic just because I call myself a feminist, or if you think that I should comment on someone's behavior just because we happen to share the same ideology despite having never met, whether that ideology is feminism or leftist or even just like being a physicist, being a scientist, whatever, I'm politely informing you that you are wrong. That's the video. Okay, can we talk for a second about how beautiful this makeup is? It is cold as fuck in here, dude. The website, I sell zines. There's a new one coming out in the next few months. You're gonna love it. I have a Substack. You can read some extra essays for a few bucks a month. It's also on Patreon. Thanks to all the lovely folks who support me. You could join them at the links in the description. I am freezing my tits off, but I look cunt as fuck.